Good morning, and welcome to Can Resiliency Be Taught? I'm Meredith Hatch. I'm a Senior Associate Director at Achieving the Dream, and I am so glad that you're here. So the Northeast Resiliency Consortium is a group of 7 Achieving the Dream institutions that came together 3 years ago and have a firm belief that indeed resiliency can be taught. Over the past 3 years, they've worked to develop resiliency in students, in their institutions, and in their communities.
We are the Northeast Resiliency Consortium, 7 community colleges dedicated to training resilient workers for resilient East Coast communities, from the hardwood boardwalk of Atlantic City to the thrum of the boroughs of New York, wheel around the churning interchanges of Connecticut to the shipyard of Boston Harbor. Funded by a 3-year, $23 million TAC grant, the NRC has enhanced and created workforce development and programs of study across the region. At the center of our name is our core value, resiliency, an individual's persistent development and application of knowledge, skills, and resources that effectively help one adapt to change and overcome adversity. Not just a framing idea, resiliency is a tool for our students, instructors, staff, and their institutions. Resiliency comes down to the practice of 5 competencies: self-awareness, critical thinking, adaptability, reflective learning, and collaboration. A resilient student in our programs will demonstrate these abilities to receive certification, then become the resilient job candidate who brings these capabilities to a future employer, becoming part of a resilient company that can translate these values to the workforce and the greater community. The NRC has developed programs of study in the energy, healthcare, and information technology sectors. Through preparation and, most importantly, constant, even intrusive support, the NRC strives to serve the larger community by starting with the very heart, our community colleges. To learn more about the NRC, visit northeastresiliency.org.
We're so excited you're here, and I'm going to pass it to the director of the Northeast Resiliency Consortium, Paul Casey.
The thing is, resiliency, we're not the only ones talking about it. You know, it's clear that resiliency is a topic that people have been talking about for a while. In the New Yorker magazine just last week, I encourage everyone to take a look at this article, How People Learn to Become Resilient. And it really talked about the psychological control component of being resilient and the perceptions, the key to resilience. Do you conceptualize an event as being traumatic, or do you use it as an opportunity to learn? And I think that that's something that, we, at the very base of what we are as a consortium, is we want to take every opportunity, not just to learn, help our students learn, but to help our institutions learn. So as we were, taking on this task of whether or not resiliency can be taught, we wanted to develop a competency model, and it was really important that we went through a really rigorous process in order to get to the document that many of you have in your hands, the Resiliency Competency Model. So these are the steps that we took in order to get there. And when we started, it was 7 colleges, and we had faculty and staff from the 7 colleges that were part of the conversation to determine what were the real core elements of resiliency that were the competencies that we could pass on to our students. But having 7 schools in the room wasn't good enough. So we continued through the process, and we developed an action plan. We bring in more data, and we get opinions from our employers, our students, our faculty, so that we really can validate that we're onto something, and that's what we've done. And from there came the Resiliency Competency Model, and this was really the first step. So this competency model now has been in existence for a good almost 12 months. But the step after that was saying, well, what do we do with it? How do we get it into our classrooms? So the NRC is undertaking a pilot where 17 of our programs now have been integrated into, or have these competencies mapped into their program. And data is being collected on how students feel at the beginning of a program in regards to these competencies, how they're feeling at the end, whether they're getting these competencies. We're looking at the grades and we're getting instructor feedback. The 7 colleges, as I mentioned, are Atlantic Cape Community College in Atlantic City, Bunker Hill Community College in Boston, Capital Community College in Hartford, Connecticut, Housatonic Community College, Kingsborough Community College, LaGuardia Community College, and Alese. And these are the 15 initial programs that were part of the pilot project. We've now expanded it to a couple of others, and we're in the process of mapping it to some of our student success courses and college experience courses in order to map those courses to it as well. And the data will, we believe, will really support that. This put in front of you, and Ed, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about this curriculum alignment table.
Yeah, so this is how we processed basically all the great ideas that are, how we process all the great ideas that they have in terms of how they teach, not necessarily what they teach, but how they teach. So on the left-hand side, you have the objectives or the outcomes that you wanted. Again, all instructors kind of wrote about them differently in different ways. And interestingly enough, a lot of instructors use that column last. They started with kind of, well, what do I actually kind of do on my feet in the classroom? What do I want my students to be doing? So they ended up filling the third column in first with what they're doing. Their activities are in the third column. How they assess it is in the fourth. And then the course content is in the middle, right there in the middle or in the second column. And then lastly, they kind of said, okay, what ultimately do I want my students to get out of the activity that I've done?
So we wanted to give an example of, and I hope the video works this time.
I Googled one day cooking classes. I wanted to be a chef. And I was under the impression that I couldn't do it. I graduated August 4th, and we ended that day like 2 p.m. or so. By 4 o'clock, I was starting my new job as a chef downtown in 42nd Street. I can cook now, and I can make you whatever you want. And it feels good to have the confidence to have a talent, that I didn't have before. And it's awesome. This program has helped me out to grow up and become a man that I should have been a couple years ago.
So now we're going to move into our panel discussion. As we go through this, we'll take questions at the end from the audience in regards to other things that may come up. So maybe we'll show the video again, but at least now we're not going to worry about technology anymore.
Except for mine.
So we're going to start by talking a little bit about what resiliency looks like on the college campus that are represented here at the table. So, Alissa, if you want to start with that.
Sure. So at King, can everybody hear me?
No.
Now? No. I'll just talk about it.
Oh. So at Kingsborough, we designed the curriculum for the resiliency component of our program to use this positive psychology approach, similar to the New Yorker article that was posted earlier, that if you haven't read, you really should, because it really encompasses everything that we've done. So our curriculum manager at Kingsborough, who's designing the resiliency component, thought, resiliency can be taught. If somebody encounters a challenge or adversity, what skills do they need to overcome that? Rather than, similar to somebody said earlier, recoil and become a victim. How do we give students the tools and skills that they need to overcome challenges that they're going to face in college, in their career, in their personal lives, so that they don't stop and walk away, that they can actually push through? And we said, let's start in the very beginning of the program. So a lot of our students are adult learners, average age about 32. They've been out of school, out of work. Maybe they've never been on a college campus. So we started with what we call bridge training. And in bridge training, we help students adapt to college life. We give them a college ID, we give them the college tour, but then we go a step further. And we talk about, what are your goals? What do you anticipate challenges might be? How are you going to overcome those challenges? What is your learning style to be prepared once you go into the classroom? Not everybody learns the same way.
What are the workshops that we can provide students to overcome challenges that we can't necessarily anticipate? So how do you resolve conflict? How do you manage stress? What are your triggers for challenges? What are your triggers for stress, and how do we anticipate this and deal with it? So these are all workshops that we provide in bridge training and on a weekly basis throughout the training. We also do online trainings through FEMA, which are Workplace Violence and Diversity, which also gives students the opportunity to use technology. We have one component at Kingsborough for the community health worker training that's a hybrid, and a lot of students have never been in an online class, let alone a hybrid setting. So we said, let's not only prepare them how to use Blackboard, but let's teach them how to, manage their time and not, succumb to it's too much work in class, out of class, plus the internship and my personal life and possibly jobs. So we really try to anticipate every challenge they could encounter in each of our training programs, some of which I'll discuss a little bit later, especially our culinary arts program, which has a terrific resiliency module. In addition to the workshops we give during Bridge and then on a weekly basis to reinforce it along the course of the semester, we also provide individual services, so helping students enroll in college, helping students prepare for jobs and do their resumes and interview, but also we provide the personal counseling that students need to overcome any challenges that are preventing them from success in the program. And we've really heard, as Desi mentioned earlier, that students come back to us. Not only are they staying in the program, but they're reporting that they've never completed a training program before, that they feel connected to the program and to the team, and that the cohort model that we run the trainings in provide an ongoing source of support after training is over, which we can plant the seed for resiliency now, and it just carries through even after training is complete.
Okay, so we do a lot of the same things that Alissa does over at Kingsborough at Housatonic Community College. We mapped resiliency into our orientation workshops. So all of our students are receiving the resiliency workshops in orientation. There's also an online orientation option, and we did map it. And there goes the sound again. Oh, there it is again. Okay. I'm like, I could be loud if I have to, though. So we also have an online orientation in which it's mapped in the online orientation as well. The importance of is providing a personal connection. So with Forward, we really try to meet with students, inform that personal connection, because as we all know that that personal connection leads to retention of students. It is being mapped into our freshman year experience class, and then continued to be mapped into our content classes. The importance of that is that we all know that there's a decline in student success after that freshman year success class. So they do really well that semester, and the following semester they do a little bit, they start to decline and lose those, all the attributes that are taught in that class. They start to forget. They're learning other things, they're starting to forget that. So a lot of colleges have implemented sophomore seminars and, junior year, they have funky names at every college, but right? So, by mapping the competencies into the content classes, you do not have to have your student take an extra class or a symposium or a workshop. Because I don't know about your workshop attendance, but sometimes workshop attendance is low because they're working and they have families, and there's a lot of other things going on in their lives. The last thing we provide at the college is our trainings. So we do workshops, but they are FEMA trainings. We have them specialized to IT and healthcare. It really is done by our Bridgeport Director of Homeland Security. And he just gives them a really good idea into the possible disasters that they would run into in the jobs that they are going into. We also do personal preparedness training with him through Homeland Security, and he provides all this to us for free. And he said that any Homeland Security person would come in and train you because it makes their job easier. So I can assure you that you can find a champion in your community to help you do that. And the last thing is a vicarious trauma training that we're offering this semester for our healthcare students. We don't teach our students how to deal with death. We train CNAs that go into the workforce, into nursing homes, and then 2 weeks later they get close to this patient and that patient dies, and they don't know how to handle that. How do you not take on other people's trauma? So really just having those hard conversations with students surrounding that.
Is there one more?
We'll share. So the next, in kind of building off of that question, Morgan, I was wondering if you can provide some examples of how resiliency is used in the classroom and the programs that are being offered at Housatonic.
Yes. We want you to know, if you're faculty members, that you're probably already doing some things in your classes that constitute resiliency, you just might not know it. And so that's the whole point of mapping our programs onto our resiliency chart that you saw earlier, and then the competencies that you have in your hand. So at Housatonic, we have a community health worker program, and in that program we teach our students motivational interviewing. They go over conflict resolution skills, communication skills, and then after that they'll practice a role play scenario, which I'm sure many faculty members have used some kind of role play in their classroom. And you have one student as the community health worker and then one student playing the client, who's been coached by the instructor to offer negative feedback. So body language, facial expressions, verbally, being apathetic, defensive, confrontational. And the community health worker has to tap into those resources that they've learned about, so this reflective learning, going back saying, okay, what can I pull from my knowledge base? How do I approach this situation, and how can I change my reaction accordingly to get my point across to the client? And so they do a debrief afterwards, they evaluate it, the two students talk and say what worked, let's give feedback, how can we improve it in the future? So it really does tap into 4 of the competencies, just not collaboration, because there's no unified goal necessarily. And then another thing that's really unique to our community health workers, just because the nature of a community health worker, they want to pull resources from the campus and the community to help people. And the first semester that we started this program, our students wanted to run and lead, organize their own graduation ceremony and reception. So it's an amazing feat that they go into. They pull all the resources together. They figure out who has this talent, this skill, this gift. What can they contribute to the ceremony? They invite all their friends and family. They plan the food, the venue most likely on campus, entertainment, music. It could be as simple as they'll have a Pandora station, or one semester they brought a DJ. And it was a friend of a friend of a friend, so it was free. And that's one of the goals, to make it as little to no cost as possible. So there's no burden on the students, and they get to run it themselves, and they're really proud of that. They get to celebrate that. The other goal is they learn about cultural humility and tolerance in the classroom as community health workers, and then they translate that over, and they want to celebrate all of their heritages. So the food, they make sure to tap into all the different student populations, and we had one student who wanted to contribute the entire buffet of food, who wanted to make all of the Jamaican food and serve 80 to 100 people. So it's interesting to see that come together, and that collaboration. That would be the biggest example for that program of collaborating, coming together, unified goal of celebrating their accomplishments. And then in my own classroom that I teach literature and composition, and there's a couple things that I do. Literature circles, it's a cooperative environment, nothing new. It's not something that I came up with. I'm not reinventing the wheel. But my students, they read a short story, and they get into groups of 5. And they've done an outside assignment. So they've picked a role, historical researcher, they're looking at the setting and the time frame of the story. Discussion director is coming up with really great questions. Illustrator, and so forth. They all pick the illustrator. They love illustrating. And they have their job description, their task, and they're going home, they're doing their own individual assignment. So they have to be accountable for themselves, are responsible for their own work. It's not that typical group work that you would imagine where you have the leader and then all the slackers that just get the credit for it. So they come in with their own piece and they share out, and then at the end, so critical thinking is key for that, as they're talking about the story and reading it for a purpose, and then coming together and talking about it and bringing up really fruitful conversations. So at the end, they grade themselves. So they fill out a self-evaluation, a rubric 1 to 5, answering questions like, how prepared was I today? Did I complete my assignment in its entirety? Did I contribute meaningfully to discussion, and so on and so forth? And then they evaluate their peers. So they fill out 4 peer evaluations, and those are averaged out, and there's their grade. When I first implemented this, I was really nervous because I'm thinking they're not going to be honest. They're gonna figure out a way to say, okay, I'll give you 100, like even if you didn't bring it in. But I'm kind of that last person that looks at it, and I can tell when their work is up here and they've slacked off and it's down here. So then we have a little talk about self-awareness. So that's huge. And then there are, in my class, we started new student orientation. And we'll talk about that a little further. And I want to have touch points along the semester to kind of remind them of things that they've learned in orientation, so that it's not something they're losing, it's something that's reiterated throughout the college, and creating that kind of culture of resiliency in the classroom. So in orientation, we talk about writing a professional email to your professor, and then that's transcending the college classroom, and it's in the workplace, writing a professional email to your supervisor, to future employers. And any faculty members? Yep, so you've received those emails that are long and rambling, they have no grammatical, it doesn't make any sense. Maybe it doesn't even have a name attached to it. They didn't address you as a professor. They didn't sign off, they didn't say who they were. It's coming from kittenxoxo@gmail.com, so you have no idea who it is. And so it's teaching our students to write a professional email in a templated way and to get their point across. And that, I do a short 5-10 minute presentation on that again to remind them. Hopefully you didn't lose that skill last semester, and continuing that process. So it doesn't take a lot of energy on my part to give that short 10-minute lesson, even though it has nothing to do with literature. So, and I preface with that, we're going to do an activity that has nothing to do with literature, and they get really excited about it. So the last thing is stress relief around finals week, and make sure to remind them about some things that they learned in orientation. High power poses. So as successful professionals, you're probably doing it all the time. You're standing up in Wonder Woman pose, right? This idea of opening yourself up, making yourself big, and it's been proven. Amy Cuddy, we talk about her and Harvard Business School and the studies that they've done, that if you practice these high power poses for 2 minutes a day, that it raises your confidence levels and your self-esteem and lowers your stress level. So I don't mind if my students come in before midterms and they've got their hands behind their head and their feet on the desk, that if that's going to make them successful, I'm fine with it. So they love doing that, and that's constantly reminding them, high power poses, high power poses. And then the last thing, right before finals week, I have them watch a TED Talk. Kelly McGonigal's TED Talk on how to make stress your friend. And it's kind of reframing that idea that we have about stress, that stress is harmful. And she says, no, it's actually just the belief that stress is harmful that makes it harmful. So we have some interesting conversation about that, and then I always have the naysayers that are like, I don't think that. But if I've converted someone in some way to believe that stress is a little better on their bodies than they've believed before, then hopefully that'll help them in the future. That's it.
So you want to give it to?
Sure. So one example that we have, in addition to what I mentioned earlier, is our culinary arts curriculum. So the culinary arts program at Kingsborough has been around for a while. This grant gave us the exciting opportunity to develop a resiliency module within culinary arts. So our training itself will prepare people for safety and sanitation, hands-on skills, everything you need to be successful in the kitchen. But what happens when there's an emergency? What happens when the power goes out? So we have a 6-module part that goes into the curriculum that prepares students for small emergencies, such as what happens if there's an argument in the kitchen between staff, or what happens if a piece of equipment breaks, up to big emergencies. What happens if there's a gas leak or a flood, or a health inspector comes and kind of disrupts everything that you're in the middle of doing. So basically, the instructors are excited to finally take their industry experience that they're bringing to the program as instructors who have been in the field for a while, and show students how to use their resources, how to use these resiliency competencies, self-awareness, critical thinking, collaboration, which is huge. You can't have the entire kitchen running in a different direction every time we have a surprise visit from the Department of Health. So it's a really nice piece that we see the department planning to adopt, which has been a very exciting development as a result of this grant.
Okay, thank you, Morgan and Alisa. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about what else is going on at other schools in the consortium.
Yeah, pass the mic, I guess. Yeah. So I've had sort of the exciting, fun job of just going to different schools, traveling around the north, the area between kind of New Jersey and Boston, kind of talking to different instructors about what they're doing. And I wanted to just highlight what the IT faculty do, in particular at a lot of our different colleges, especially the two in Connecticut, Housatonic and Capital, and then in Bunker Hill in Massachusetts. It's built on exactly what you're talking about, what Alisa was talking about with culinary, and it's almost kind of going up one exponent. They create their classroom, or they run their classroom like you would run the workplace environment, because it's something a student has never had the experience of. And they'll actually kind of do role play for pretty much the entire course of the course. So, for instance, at Capital Community College, Saeed El-Adid runs a couple networking classes, and he has a rule that you are not going to raise your hand and talk to me, or I won't even answer your question until you speak to somebody to your left, to your right, back left, back right, and the person directly behind you. Then you can raise your hand, or you can come up and talk to me. Until then, I am not here. I'm your boss. You can't go run and talk to your, hey, how do I do this? How do I do this? You can't raise your hands when you go into the workplace. So he is building a collaborative environment. Collaboration's on the list, but he's not necessarily doing anything at all. He is, but he isn't. You know what I mean? It's a passive but incredibly activating activity. There's I'm trying to think of another IT example. Brian Craven at Bunker Hill is he's kind of a tall guy with a very deep voice, very sort of an NPR deep baritone voice, and he'll role play as the boss of the client. He'll be kind of difficult with his students. They'll be working on a project, and then it'll be presented in class, and he'll be like, well, that's not what I asked for. But no, you said on the instructions that that's not what I asked for. You're going to need to do that again. I'm going to need to see that tomorrow. So again, it seems like it's sort of antagonistic, but it's really not. That you are going to deal with somebody who might be a little bit unreasonable, and that sort of room of a third thing in terms of creating that equal room. A lot of especially IT students will come in with a body of knowledge that may in some ways even equal your instructor. Technology changes so fast, and all the IT professors I've talked to will admit that, there are things that my students know that I don't know. So if we're working in like his Maya, one of the Maya classes, Maya Foundations, it's a type of coding. It's a way of writing code, and somebody else runs like, oh, can I do that in blah blah blah? And they're like, I don't know. You got a terminal in front of you. Why don't you try it? I'm gonna do something here. I'm gonna check back with you in 20 minutes. Can you run it? I don't know. I'm curious to know. And then that person will report out to the entire room. So again, that workplace where you really, our instructors are from the workplace. They are workers. So they're going to share that work knowledge alongside of the content and deliver that content in the same way that you would do it in the workplace. So that's That's certainly probably one of those really unique things where this, it's not like a magic trick, this sort of competency thing. It's, you are doing it anyway, and it's just, you change how you teach a little bit, and suddenly you are building their skill set as you are giving them new knowledge.
So one of the things that I hear is, when it becomes intentional to use the competencies, the results get better. One of the things that I wanted to add in regards to another example of what's happening in our classrooms is that at LaGuardia Community Colleges, they've developed a psychological trauma training for their EMT and paramedic programs. They had identified that there was a gap in how first responders were dealing with trauma, in that they deal with trauma by fixing the broke leg or bending the leg and putting a splint on it so that they can go to the hospital and get the cast. But they weren't trained, EMTs and paramedics had not been trained how to deal with the trauma that is affected with being in a car accident or whatever that traumatic event might be. So they developed a model called Escape that addresses that. And we've mapped the resiliency competencies to that as well. And that's now a curriculum that we are sharing beyond the LaGuardia to all the other colleges. It's being picked up industry-wide, and that's something that we would look forward to sharing with you in the future as well. But I wanted to add that as another example of the ways that we took these competencies and are helping students not now just help themselves, but help others. Just to move on to, Morgan, you touched on this earlier in regards to the new student. Can you talk a little bit more about, how we help a newer student be more resilient?
So new student orientation, we've always had it at Housatonic, but recently we revamped it. And so we wanted to add this resiliency workshop. In the fall, we piloted as a full class period, so it was about an hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes, to have our new students, maybe they're coming from high school, maybe they've just been working for a while, and they're experiencing college for the first time in a long time, or first time ever, that they've never sat in a class for that amount of time. And so Ed and I did new student orientation.
It's a hoot, it's really
fun. And every couple minutes we would check in and how are you feeling right now? Are you hungry? Are you tired? Do you need caffeine? You might want to think about that when you come to college and you have to sit in your class, bring your coffee, that's fine. Oh, we can bring coffee, we can bring food.
Yeah.
Okay.
That 45-minute check-in was a real revelation for a lot of people. Again, especially kids coming right out of high school. That's when they'd be changing periods. Their teacher would be winding down. But in a college classroom, you still probably have another few things that you need to do. That final 20 minutes, you can't fall asleep during that. Maybe when an assignment comes up. So that check-in was fun, and then of course the cell phone thing is always
classroom etiquette. So we went over food, laptops, cell phones, and yeah, we would keep an eye on, okay, who has their cell phone out? Who's looking at their cell phone? And then we'd say, okay, Ed, I noticed about 20 people. How many did you? And they're just like, what? I say, put them away.
You get a good laugh. It really, but they really, it's funny. They actually, I don't think I've ever had that conversation with students, and they were like, yeah, it's rude. But
they know.
But you're so attached to an object like that. But I think the food thing is, for some students, is also a revelation that they may not necessarily have thought of. Because a lot of our students, they may not have been able to afford food that day. It might have been 2 packs of cheese doodles for breakfast. That if you come in with a full McDonald's spread, you walk in from the cafeteria with a whole bunch of really, good or maybe bad smelling food, you might be sitting next to somebody who might be having a rough time, whose kids ate, but they chose not to. That's something you got to think about, in an environment like the ones that we work in. And they may not have thought of that, not because they're insensitive, but just because they just hadn't been exposed to it yet.
Self-awareness.
Yes.
And awareness of the people around you as well. So along with classroom etiquette, we talk about study skills, we go over note-taking, time management. To also say in the spring, we piloted this as just a 30-minute workshop to make it go a little quicker. And that was fine too. We did the check-ins, it was just a shorter segment and we condensed everything. And then the last one, communicating with your professor. So and we show the the non-examples, here are real life emails that we've
Yeah. It
received.
took me like 3 minutes to find those 3 examples. I literally just kind of
They're in
flipped through my
there.
inbox and
And
went
then
1, 2, 3, done.
And then we show them the template of, okay, let's greet your professor, give them a title, professor would be nice, Dr. so-and-so, and then sign off with your name, because we like to know who you are. We like to know that too.
Again, workplace training. You know, if they may have to go into a workplace where they are going to be sitting at a computer terminal typing and writing emails for the first time. And they've never done that. They've only ever communicated with their thumbs. So if that's the majority of the writing they've been doing, that's the writing that they know. We're going to teach them the code switch. We're going to teach them to say, okay, there's another code that you need to understand, and it involves hi, thanks, exclamation point. Like, it's exactly how you want a good work review. All of your emails say hi, thanks, exclamation point, and your name. It's like,
And the code switching came in, we saw this semester when we did it, and we talked about titles, right? Professor Smith, Dr. Smith. And I had one student raise his hand and say, I'm a veteran. I'm in the military, and I would say Miss or Mr.
Sir.
And I would say sir or ma'am. So dear sir or ma'am. And I said, okay, I'm also a military brat, came from the military. I completely understand what you're saying. However, we're in academia, so just treat it like, I would say Sergeant Smith. It's just a title. So Professor Smith, Dr. Smith. And that clicked for him, just looking at it in a different light. So.
yeah, and the resiliency thing is going to be thinking about those corners, you know, those like, it's something like, and it's just a conversation we're having with our students. That came from him. You know, like he said, I'm a veteran. I mean, it would, you know, again, self-identifying can sometimes be an uncomfortable thing in classrooms, but he's like, yeah, I'm a veteran. You know, I want to talk about this. And you'll learn so much from your students by just having those opportunities, setting up those opportunities and letting that information about resiliency come to you.
Anything else you want to add?
And I don't know if we mentioned this earlier, but in the consortium, you know, in the 7 colleges, we're all very, very different. And one of, you know, so the theme around here is this resiliency competency model. But it's important to note that this isn't just academic program; it's workforce programs as well. And about 2/3 of the programs that we run in the Northeast Resiliency Consortium are workforce programs, where 1/3 are on the academic side. So this is a model that we're being able to use on either side. You know, right? So that's why I thought that would be important to mention. The other thing that I wanted to mention in regards to new students, and it's kind of now going to be happening in the original 15 pilots, we did not map it to a student success course or a college experience course. That is now being done at a couple of different institutions, and we're even looking at our basic skills courses in order to get students, you know, so that they can be prepared for entrance into the school, to map it there as well. So there's a couple of things that are in the works that are to come, but we thought it would be important to share that as well. So now we're going to talk about professional development. So I'm going to kind of just pass the mic on over. I mean, I know that Ed will kind of conclude on some of the things that he's done, but I'll pass.
Sure. So at Kingsborough, we were very excited to have this opportunity to offer professional development to our staff. I think Paul mentioned earlier, every school that's part of this consortium is in a state that experienced some sort of traumatic event, some sort of crisis leading up to the writing of this grant. So in New York, Kingsborough, we're surrounded by water on 3 sides. We were badly hit by Hurricane Sandy. And it wasn't only our college campus, but it was our staff, our faculty, our students. So we said, how do we prepare our staff and faculty to be more resilient, to set that example for students, to be able to take care of themselves while they're taking care of students should an event like this, you know, God forbid, occur again. So we started with the basics. We brought in our Director of Allied Health, and he runs the Emergency Management EMT program. And he had trained our staff and faculty on emergency preparedness in New York City, what to look for, how to prepare, how to respond, how to recover. We later were able to work with New York State Citizens Preparedness Corps. They came and they were able to give a really in-depth training, and they even gave out backpacks full of everything you would need in the case of an emergency, a go bag. But then we took it a step further and we said, how can our staff prevent emergencies on campus? We see this unfortunately happening across the country. And we said, let's start by identifying red flags in the classroom. And we were able to work with our counseling department, and they came in to talk to our faculty and staff to talk about what kind of behaviors staff and faculty should be looking out for. And in our programs, because we're workforce training, our staff and faculty will come directly to us, and we have the procedures in place to intervene, as opposed to maybe faculty on the credit side who have to conclude class and then seek out the right supports. In our case, where we're very intrusive, we're very involved, and we don't let incidents go by without addressing them. We've also trained our staff on our end to work with the counseling center in terms of a psychiatric emergency. We're not going to just call 911 and have everybody ambush our student. We have a very good relationship with the counseling center, who has a relationship with Long Island Jewish Hospital, which has a unit specifically for college students in the psychiatric ward. So it's not just they're getting taken to Coney Island Hospital, that they're just with general population. They're with people who are in the same situation. We've also had public safety come and do a workplace violence training. We're grant-funded staff. Our grant-funded staff is not CUNY staff, and they don't get workplace violence training, so we brought that in for our team specifically. We also had an active shooter training, which we hope to never have to use, but it is a reality on college campuses, and it was something that our staff had brought to our attention, and eventually our students brought it to our staff attention. We were able to give it to our students as well. On the positive side, we have also brought effective communication skills, and we were able to work with our team how to understand one another better, anticipate one another better, pick up on the cues that Ed and Morgan have been talking about. We don't know what's happening in our colleagues' lives. How do we be more sensitive? How do we communicate better? And finally, we were very lucky to have motivational interviewing, which we've been able to work with our students to use across our programs. So we've been very excited about the professional development opportunities as a part of this grant.
Speak quickly on it. So part of the mapping process of the resiliency competencies, right now they're just in grant-funded programs, and our next step is to introduce that to the entire faculty on campus. So Professional Development Day comes up in April, and Ed and I will be presenting on that to introduce them to the competencies, how you do it, and then try to get some buy-in. Is anyone interested? It'll be voluntary, not forcing it upon everybody.
The only thing I was going to add, in order to get to all the faculty, it's important to record your workshops and post them online. There's a lot of adjunct faculty, so it's really good to engage your adjunct faculty. So things that we are practicing is recording some of these workshops so they have the opportunity to attend just as much as the full-time faculty do.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add that. Yeah, fine. I get to play with the toys that everyone else does. I think the 5 competencies make a great way to build a professional development, some sort of professional development moment. Mapping one, kind of have everybody do this kind of the same kind of assignment, like a reflective writing piece, and then code it, and then come in and talk about how it did, how it turned out. And if only because I was there talking to all these instructors, having your instructors come in and just kind of nerd out about what they're doing and using the codes as a way to talk about them. Honestly, it was just a really wonderful time talking with people and who feel like they're by themselves. It's like, oh, I'm doing this thing. It's like everybody wants to know that you're doing that really cool thing. And what I've ended up doing is kind of being a conduit for sharing that. So yeah, anytime you can gather them together for professional development around this, it's going to pay off in a huge amount. So.
And I would add that there is a video orientation that Morgan had completed that is available for distribution. So if anyone wanted to use that, that's
use a student actor too. She's great.
That's something that we can offer, and we will. We had a president's roundtable right before this session, and I think one of the things that came out of that is we'll be taking this on the road a little bit more because we want to scale these competencies much more broadly than we have. So I wanted to follow up by talking a little bit about measurement and assessment of the competencies and resiliency. So if we can, talk about how you're seeing, what are the results that you're seeing initially?
Sure. So, as I said earlier, qualitatively, students are coming to us and explaining that they they feel more empowered. They feel like they have better access to resources, that they've never completed a program before. And we're definitely seeing that. We have an 80% completion rate in our program so far. And we definitely see that the services we're providing are supporting the retention in our programs. And we're really excited about that. We are participating in the consortium's evaluation overall, which I think Paul and Ed can talk about a little later. But we're also doing on our campus a smaller scale evaluation. So every workshop that we've offered, we have developed a survey based on the goals of that workshop. We developed a Likert scale to have students evaluate, did they achieve those goals that were intended for the workshop? And then we've collected the surveys, and an independent evaluator in our department who's not involved with this program, so she's not worked with the students, is assessing those surveys, and she's also going to convene focus groups and talk to students about do they feel more resilient? What do they understand about resiliency? Did they walk away with the competencies that were intended for that workshop? So that's happening now, and we're looking forward to seeing the results. Next year at ATV, we should have some more feedback.
As far as the orientation goes, we did a pre and post session. 73% of the students, felt more prepared to start college and identified as feeling more prepared. So that was really, really, really well. I mean, obviously everything's pretty early in getting results. We have seen an increase in our retention rates in our non-credit programming. We do have credit programming as well, but as you know, it takes a little bit longer. So at this point, we do not have any results for our non-credit. Our retention rates in our credit programming and in our non-credit programming, our retention rates are about from 87% to about 98%. So those are really excellent retention to completion rates. Our students, we're watching our students and we're asking them, and we're getting a lot of really positive feedback from our FEMA trainings. Students were like, I never really even thought of that. We showed an example of a train derailment that happened in Bridgeport, Connecticut. We got first-hand pictures from Homeland Security because he was first on the scene. He's also the director of emergency management for the city of Bridgeport, so we pretty much get all access. But he threw up pictures of what that scene looked like. He talked about what was happening at the scene, who took charge of that scene, how all of a sudden they called in the masses and police, fire, and EMT, and who coordinated that, what that looked like.
It's a couple blocks away from our building.
Yeah, it wasn't
right there.
So he really gave them really concrete examples, and the students came out and said, I really feel like, not that anyone's really prepared for that kind of an emergency because they're all so different, but they're like, wow, there's so many systems that are in place, and I feel like when I walk into my employer, I can ask what systems are in place. In the same aspect, our employers have given us really, really good feedback. As far as, sometimes in healthcare and in our IT field, orientation happens 2, 3, 4, maybe a month later. It depends how many trainings you get in or how many employees are hired at once. So they like the fact that our students were coming in and asking the questions. Do you have a manual for emergency preparedness? Do you have a manual to tell me what to do, if the power goes out? So they're asking those questions, and it's putting on the forefront for the employers, and our employers are really excited. We also do something that's really important. We always ask our employers to employ our students. Well, we invite our employers into our FEMA trainings to bring their employees, their incumbent workers, the people that work for them. It's a give back to the employers for employing our students. We say, come and see the FEMA trainings, come and participate with us. And they're very active participants in the FEMA training. So far it's been a really good partnership.
So also in regards to assessment, as Alissa alluded to, the consortium was working with an industrial psychologist who's created some evaluation tools for us. So students are going into the program and taking a pre-test and going and leaving and taking a Likert scale and taking a post-steps test. We're also gathering the information from the instructors on grades and instructor feedback directly. So we have preliminary information that we don't have too much to share about right now, but I can say that we've had 70 students that have gone through a post-test. We did that initial cohort. We didn't do a pre-test because we didn't go through IRB approval at the time. So we had some of those hurdles to jump. But with 70 that went through a post-test, and almost entirely they either agree or strongly agree that they obtained the competencies as a result of the programs that they were in. So that was a nice initial. We don't have a whole lot of more to back that up at this point, but that was a nice beginning data point for us to speak to. So I want to combine the next two questions because timing is a factor, and I want to make sure that the audience has a chance to ask questions. So I'm gonna. The next two questions have to do with our engagement with employers, but also how resiliency in the community college can manifest itself in the community. So I think that we can kind of link those two questions together. So please.
So just continuing off on what I just said about our employers, I think I gave really examples of what our employers are saying and how to get your employers involved, and that really trickles to the community as well. Providing a venue for Homeland Security. There's not a lot of big venues in town. How about that? The college provides a big space for Homeland Security to do trainings. So a give back to Homeland Security would provide a venue to the community for them to be able to come in and have those personal preparedness. The more personal prepared the community is, the safer the community is. They don't have to worry about the individuals that have already been trained, and it reduces the stress on the EMTs and on the police force and on the Homeland Security to secure the area. So they really will do this. And maybe it's just Scott, but if you're having any problems, you can always contact me. I can get a hold of Scott, and he can connect you to the person that will be like him. But he's just an amazing asset. So just providing that out into the community. And we're building a community. We're community colleges. We're building the community. So providing resiliency throughout the curriculum and to our students, preparing them for employment, that's benefiting the community, and it rubs off. Our personal touches of our program are contagious. We have friends of a friend of a friend of a friend calling us saying, I want to be in the forward program. Can you help me? So it's important, and I think that is spreading into the community in that facet.
So at Kingsborough, we are able to offer something we haven't been able to offer before. It's called Food Service Upgrade. It's a 1-credit class that's comprised of preparing students for the New York City Department of Health exam and the ServSafe, which is nationally recognized for food safety. And in the past, this has only been part of the 12-week, 7-credit program that people had to enroll in for 3 or 4 months. This is something we're able to take to our employer partners and share with them so that they can have their employees prepared at a very low cost to get their certifications, to be prepared to handle food safely. And it also, we put in the resiliency module, we put in employment readiness to improve employees' etiquette in the workplace. And that's been a really nice product that we've been able to provide to our employer partners. Our employer partners are a lot of smaller independent businesses. We don't have large employers for something like food service. We have a lot of individual employers across New York City, and we see that they're coming back repeatedly for new staff whenever they have a position. So we're happy that our students are going into the workforce and using the training and the resiliency preparation that they've had to encourage employers to come back to us for more employees. And our employer partners have also been involved with the networking calls with Passaic to give feedback and confirmation that these resiliency competencies are actually what they're looking for in the workplace.
Yes, that was a very important point that the employers have been involved from the beginning. I think the other thing to add is that in regards to community, there was a reason that we picked the 3 sectors that we did. Those healthcare, information technology, energy, they're all big pieces of building the infrastructure for a community. So by doing that, we really wanted to impact the communities, the 7 communities that we're part of. So I think that we've provided a lot of good information, but I'm sure there's questions that individuals in the audience might have. So I wanted to now take the time to do that. Being that we only have one working microphone,
So this thing seems to be started because of natural disasters that were really out of everybody's control. what's the parallel between this training they receive and dealing with and being resilient due to poor choices that the student maybe made? So kind of self-inflicted trauma, if you will, and how to bounce back with that. Is there, as you were talking about homeland security plans and things like that, but is there a direct correlation, or would you even say it's more directed to that once you get in the individual classroom student?
Putting on my other hat, thinking of from a trauma perspective, I mean, trauma is technically trauma, but self-inflicted or
I guess people trying to bounce back from poor decision making they've made, and it's created this very unhealthy certainly not a good environment for them to learn, but also just to live.
Absolutely. And so, but by making them self-aware, some of the things we do is we ask the obstacles that will get into their way. We ask them, where are your goals and objectives, and what are some obstacles that'll get in the way? And a lot of them will self-identify those obstacles. So that's mostly in forward. I mean, it's mostly through one-on-one, where we have to talk students through. We had for example, a woman who is in homelessness. She has many situations that have occurred that had put her into that situation, self-inflicted, as but she's continuously come in to our program. She has been attached to us for 16 months, and it took 16 months to get her registered for classes because of all of the barriers that she had to work through. So we just took it one step at a time. We had to break it down into the smallest steps in order for her to do it. So the first thing we were trying to secure some kind of housing program. So we were working with the homeless shelter she was at, and we asked her where she was with her counselor. She wrote back letters, like snail mail, back and forth to us because that's all she had available to her. So just really taking it individually, one student at a time. So especially with that personal kind of situation, we really walk them through one step at a time, and then once they get into curriculum, really building them up to be employable.
Yeah, and somebody mentioned the big test, nursing. Somebody mentioned the nursing. That by the modular nature of the things that we've been creating, kind of up and down this table, that if you're having an open conversation where you kind of open up the board behind you, hopefully like a whiteboard, and everyone, even if it's 20 minutes, that you're having a test-taking strategy conversation or an obstacles conversation, conflict resolution. Like any one of those things, you just sort of kind of circle the wagons and sort of make a big group conversation. You have, there are worksheets, there are little activities and stuff that you can adapt to specifically have conversations with nurses about, like what is your day like when you go home? When are you going to schedule to do, coming up with, when do you have energy? You're always doing your homework at 12 midnight, 1:30 in the morning while your kids are asleep, or before you have to wake up and nurse again. Like when's your best time? If that's your best time, great. But having that open dialogue in the classroom with the industry expert, with the instructor running that, having that instructor on board to have that conversation coming from the workplace. That it doesn't necessarily have to be kind of one of us at the table. You have a resource, every college has that resource, and it's your instructors, adjunct or otherwise, who has that work experience. And that's the beginning of getting them into that room, taking that one huge test that they're gonna, that feels like it's on, they're carrying around like an albatross.
All of our tests are like that. I think from what I hear from you guys is that if you wanted to be resilient, you start at the very beginning, the boot camp that we do, and you say, what are the obstacles you anticipate and how you might overcome them, and do your mentor support.
Pepper it in and check it. There's no, you can always have a conversation in the context of content about this stuff, and it's so rich when it happens. Because again, you're creating a gang in that room. By stopping the content, you're no longer just a single individual staring at a screen. You're now talking to one another. That's it's not a big secret, but I think that's how it works. Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to add to the gentleman's question in regards to kind of how this started and it being, the trauma to a community. When developing the competency model, it was really important that we were that we come up with a definition of resiliency, but also who we were defining it for. So in the competency model that you have in front of you, it specifically talks about it's for a community college student or an individual who is entering the workforce. So these were designed thinking about that population. Some of the other services that we've alluded to are the other layers of resiliency that we brought in there that have come into play, because resiliency is not there's not specific, it's not a specific thing. Like this, it's a really big topic, and trying to tackle all the different pieces of it has been exciting but very hard. So,
I don't know if we mentioned this earlier, but staff and faculty didn't just dictate these competencies to, we had students evaluate them. So we didn't start with the 5, because they said, well, we need this, and we need this, and college should prepare us for, they gave us feedback.
When Sandy, which we talked about, at the college I worked at, we lost power in the college for about 4 days, but our community lost electricity from 2 to 3 weeks. During that period of time, we saw students who were in fact resilient, who did carpools, no gasoline, who came to us to say, can we use the showers in the gym, which in fact we were having. But we saw resiliency. But we saw other students who just let it happen to them. They suffered through this disaster. So I think when we work on resiliency in the classroom, when we help to form a resilient individual, that's something that covers the entirety of their life. They are more adaptive to those natural disasters, those crises, and everything. So we're developing, we hope, life skills through the consortium and through these goals.
there was another question behind.
Yeah, I think this is brilliant. I love this. This me seems like it could be, I can see it as like a
If you speak up, I'm sorry.
but that's good to say.
Sorry, I think this is so applicable to everybody. I mean, I could imagine myself, it seems like a recursive thing, like in our lives we always kind of need to come back to these sorts of things. I can see myself in terms of like, I could learn to be more self-aware at times, right? I think that it would help just in terms of the entire college. So my question is this, I love that they're competencies, it's just such a unique and brilliant way of bringing that into the classroom. Do you see it as an exit as well? Like, could this be student learning outcomes? Or my college uses, like we all use the student learning outcomes, we all look at core abilities. I could see this as being like a woven into core abilities as well.
We're having that discussion. Yeah, that's something that we would really like to see happen as a resolution. Do you want to add to that?
I could. I mean, one of my conceptual ideas, is that you could identify courses that have really captured multitudes of these competencies and offer them very similar to literature or writing courses that are required by students to take. So offering them as a resiliency course and requiring students to take so many of these courses in order to complete. And it would ensure that each student would actually take these courses. And by putting them in multiple fields of study, you would be able to, it wouldn't be a burden to the student. You don't want to burden the students, but you could really identify the courses. There are certainly more courses that, like, I'm just going to give an example, but a human services course or a psychology course, there's a lot on self-discovery and self-awareness. So that would be a course that I could just say would naturally fit in a resiliency type of a course. So, it's just an idea. The possibilities are really endless, but thank you, it is something that...
It's an opportunity to have a conversation between continuing education and academic. Academics over here, continuing education is way over there. And there's a big gap in between. It doesn't have to be. This is one of the opportunities where you can have that conversation. Where the human services, instructors are talking to the continuing ed person, the one who teaches the community health worker on this with this conversation. And yeah, you can absolutely, I think it's a really great, you want to change the culture of the school? Boom, that's it.
Okay, I see 3 more hands, and we have to do this quickly because we're running out of time. Joyce.
Yeah, I'm a member at Mulvihill which does have some stuff and has a simulator, and what happens if, and the lights will go out, and it's simply a source of reality. It's more than just you're putting these programs in reality as well. We did that
Thank you.
I'll stand. I'm not like it's quite sit. So this is a room of administrators and educators, am I right? Yes, okay. So I think what's important when you're coming to the table and thinking about what some students are going through, I think that it's really important to think about the judgment that you're coming to the table with. And so in thinking about decisions that people may have made that may have been poor decisions, they're oftentimes attached to circumstances that are just difficult to deal with. And so when you're thinking about marginalized people, I had a discussion with my roommate this morning. There was a woman in New York City who she's now being held in custody because her child was in a fire and she left the child in the house because she was working as a stripper. And so it sounds like this hellacious, awful story, but the reality is she's probably making more money doing that for 4 hours than she would make working 10 hours someplace else. And so just the judging around her being a stripper, it would have been just as awful a story if she had been a dental assistant. And so I just think that we have to think about when people are making poor decisions, they're oftentimes attached to some other circumstances that are so difficult to overcome that sometimes these decisions that people make are just, it's part of the course. And so if you're a homeless person, you're making poor decisions around what you're eating because you don't have any control over what food is available to you. And so there are oftentimes many intersections that come with being homeless or having a drug issue. And so I just think it's important to think about the many intersections that come with sometimes making a poor decision when you're thinking about instilling resiliency in a person.
Yeah, like there's an IT project that was happening up at Bunker Hill. I think might have been Brian's class, where they had somebody came up with it was mobile apps. I think it was Liz's mobile apps class. Came up with an application on your phone that you can activate if you are in custody. And they had a conversation in the class about that. Again, there's no taboos. It's like we're all part of this one community, so we all know somebody who knows somebody, or maybe ourselves have been in custody at some point, that is activated if you didn't check in, because something really tragic happened to one of their family members who didn't think anybody knew that they were there, and they actually, again, tragic circumstances, took their own life. And it's like that there's a passion and there's a conversation that can happen in community college classrooms. And again, the resiliency thing right on top of it, and it just the effects just sort of go out from there. And it's stuff like that, conversations like that, and it's opportunities, because again, in an IT classroom, you can make a thing. There's a thing, there wasn't a thing, now there's a thing, and it can help.
Okay, thank you, Ed. I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank the panel for their contribution. One of the last things I'll leave you with is this work isn't done, so we've got more to do. There's a guidebook that will be coming to talk about how you can use this in any program of study. So just thank you so much, and I'm going to steal the phrase from Alese and say resiliency is putting the community in community college.
There you go.